Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV. HFO-TV is co-sponsored by the construction, repair, and restoration firm J.R. Johnson, the real estate law firm Baljanik LLP, the tax deferral accommodator Butler Exchange Group, the mortgage banking firm Gantry Incorporated, and forensic building consultants providing building structural science services.
Welcome back to HFO TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Today we have with us Shawn Church. He's editor of Random Lengths magazine based out of Eugene. Hey, Shawn, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Maybe you can give a little background on Random Lengths magazine and kind of your readers' audience, and then we kind of jump into a couple of the topics we're going to discuss today for multifamily owners.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here. So, Random Lengths is the premier trade publication covering the wood products markets, mostly commodity framing lumber and structural panels. Structural panels being plywood-oriented strand board. We've been in business over 75 years. It started back in the 1950s by Les Anderson, who was at one time the mayor of Eugene.
Right.
He turned it over to his son, John Anderson, in the mid-1980s. John owned and acted as publisher until 2018, when he sold the company to Fast Markets. Fast Markets is a division of a large corporation in London. They publish a number of other trade publications similar to ours on pulp and paper, precious metals, ag products, that kind of thing.
So it's an industry kind of commodity trade magazine based on the timber and wood products.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, we've heard in the news lately a lot about, in our world on the, residential multifamily, and construction and what's going on and the cost of construction. One of the big components we keep hearing about is the cost of raw materials, lumber in particular. I know we've had a little adjustment back down, but maybe kind of explain what kind of happened, or what are some of the reasons we saw that massive run up in the price of, lumber specifically, and kind of what we see happening in the future?
Yeah. Well, I think the big story really starts back in early 2020 when the coronavirus broke out.
Right.
And a number of things happened that restricted supply, while at the same time unleashing unprecedented demand for wood products, resulting in this record run. It's been a run like we've never seen before, as you all know. But prices spiked in mid 2020, hitting records last summer. There was some cooling off in the market in late 2020, but demand reignited just ahead of the new year and set off another run through May of this year, generating prices that far exceeded the record levels set in 2020.
And was that demand just coming out of corona, out of the virus and the pandemic? Was it maybe people? We've heard stories of, some retail was doing terrible, but you go by Home Depot because everybody's home and they're doing all these remodeling. Is it the new construction, or is this commodity with the wood now tied to a global issue too?
Yeah, it's both. First of all, the industry, when we first went into the lockdowns, like everybody, we thought that we were entering an economic apocalypse.
Right.
And the mills curtailed production. They shut some mills down, believing that they were in for a real tough go. And actually, the industry was destined to fare pretty well through this entire pandemic. They just didn't know it. For one thing, the industry was declared essential. And therefore, a lot of construction activity was allowed to continue. There were just a few metro areas that didn't allow construction in the early part of the pandemic. But business in the construction industry was largely allowed to continue, and so really the mill's reaction to this initially by shutting down or curtailing production was really an overreaction and really overshot what the true demand was for wood products. And really what we started to see emerge in as early as May or June of last year was that we had this phenomena of people quickly adjusting to working from home and then the like. Um, and that set off a trend towards homeowners, consumers wanting to move out of apartments and condos in the big cities and buy single family homes in the suburbs and exurbs. And along with underlying demand from the such as the millennial generation coming into their prime home buying years, and that being a key factor in a strengthening housing market. This demand really manifested itself in a huge way and helped ignite the lumber market. There was another thing that happened though as well, outside of new construction. Another big part of the industry, in fact, it's bigger than new construction even, is repair and remodeling and home improvement. And what we saw happen almost right off the bat with the onset of the pandemic was that people were stuck at home. They may have been laid off, more time on the weekends. And they didn't have they had money that they couldn't use to travel. They got some stimulus from the government, and they took this money and they poured it into home improvement.
Right.
And what this did was set off a what appeared to be a really unprecedented demand on the home centers such as Home Depots, Lowe's, some of the stores locally like we have here in Eugene, like Jerry's. Everybody was flocking to the home centers to buy wood for decks or sheds or porches or remodels and the like. A lot of people were remodeling, bedrooms and parts of their homes to set up home offices to work from home. And so all of these demand factors combined with the mills pullback really created this imbalance in supply and demand, and wood products prices reacted to that.
So when these mills are closed and they open back up, I mean, when a mill is opening back up, when do you see that effect for the finished product to get into the market to alleviate maybe some of the supply issues? Is it is it a 6 month, 12 month for, in this industry to get product from mill to finished?
Well, it's taken a lot longer than it might have in the past. Of course, going into the pandemic, we already had a number of labor problems, and
right.
I'm sure all your clients and so forth know about that. But the coming out of the pandemic, or once the mills recognize that there's a tremendous demand for wood products. As they tried to get their mills back up to speed, it was tough getting people back to work, and that still remains the case today. And it's one of the prime reasons why the run in lumber prices was as prolonged as it has been. Labor is is a big part of that.
And then we're both on the West Coast here, and we're hearing, we had it last year, we're having it this year again. Kind of the recent fires in the West. We know it's had an impact because, it's burning structures down. You've got then added demand, for newer construction as well, on top of the, typical you're going to see. Are you seeing that as another, I don't want to say, kind of input in to increase the demand requirement for housing, which again equates back down to lumber and hard materials?
Yeah, they certainly can. Fires have been a factor in market runs in the past, but it's actually been quite rare up until maybe the past 5 years. But it does seem over the past 5 years that fires have been having a more routine seasonal effect on wood products markets. And we have some major fires burning now in Oregon and up in British Columbia as well. And we had one major mill announcement here in the last 24 hours up in BC because of fires and their inability to move wood out of their mills on the railroad tracks.
So as an industry, when you've seen this unprecedented amount of demand, what are they doing in responding to? I mean, I know we've all had the issue with, employment issues of trying to get staffing. But is there other things the industry is looking at to try to, meet that demand, or just we're in this kind of perfect storm and we got to deal with it while we are?
Yeah, well, there's really nothing wrong with demand right now.
Right.
Although demand from the home center market has turned over. Prices ran up so hard that I think the weekend warrior has pretty much gone home, and this year, and the home center business has really stalled, and that's been a factor in bringing lumber prices down, a big factor.
So yeah, and we've just seen that because we're doing this at the end of July, and we've seen the lumber commodity prices go down from where they were, as you talked about, in the highs. So there's probably some combinations on what's bringing that down.
Yeah, well, I think the home center business turning over has been a big part of it, the biggest part of it, perhaps. The other thing is that we've seen some cooling in the single family side of things. It was stronger in late 2020 in the first quarter, and we've seen some cooling in the second quarter, and we believe a lot of that has to do with the fact that prices got out of hand.
Right.
They quadrupled from where they were pre-pandemic, and it wasn't just a matter of price. It was a matter of actually being able to get the wood, to continue building. If it wasn't lumber, it was the structural panels. There were a number of homes that were being framed, but the builders couldn't get the sheeting to proceed.
And we saw it on appliances. We have multifamily projects, and they couldn't get washer and dryers and dishwashers. There's a delay on that, and it just stacks up. Yeah,
that's an important element to all of this. It's not just lumber and structural panels. There's supply chain issues,
right,
across the economy that have really held back the ability of builders to complete projects.
And are you feeling now that where we are today and looking in the future, forward, that things are, I want to say, getting back to normal, but more of a equilibrium in terms of the supply and demand and the ability to deliver product? And like you said, the demand maybe has slowed down a little bit on the weekend warrior, but is there getting more to that balance that we were at before, or are we still dealing with some of this imbalance?
Yeah. I think it's important to remember that lumber is a commodity market. It rises and falls, so just with even small changes in supply and demand. And it's taken a while for supply to catch back up with demand, but it's happened now, and lumber prices in particular, have been in a major correction mode for the last 9 weeks.
Right.
We went, as measured by the Random Lengths Framing Lumber Composite price, we went from a record peak in May of $1,515 per thousand down to yesterday's reading of $512. So it's back down it's a third now of what it was 9 weeks ago.
Wow, that's a big adjustment. So, well, I want to thank you for taking the time to kind of share a little bit with kind of your unique perspective in that market. Because again, we see the kind of the end effects and hear about the pricing, and we're getting bids, and the last couple months people have kind of been shocked at the numbers. And like you said, it's not just lumber; it's a lot of these other commodities as well as labor that are affecting the ability to deliver pricing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So great. Well, if people want to find out more about it, they can go to the website here below. And Shawn, thanks for taking the time to talk to our audience on this.
Okay.
You're
welcome.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you next time on HFO-TV.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.